Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep into mesenchymal stem cells and natural killer cells.
Oh, yeah.
You're getting ready for a presentation on immunotherapy,
Right.
and we're going to break down how these cells work together
Okay.
and why it matters for new treatments.
Sounds good.
Our main source for this deep dive is a 2022 research review
Yeah.
from Stem Cell Research and Therapy.
Cool.
So
Yeah, let's get into it.
let's get started.
I think this is going to be really interesting.
Okay.
We're talking about two really important parts of the immune system,
Okay.
MSCs and NK cells.
Okay.
They both have very different jobs to do,
Mm-hmm.
but the way they interact
Yeah.
has big implications for how we might treat diseases down the road.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly are MSCs?
Right.
I know they're stem cells,
Yeah.
but what makes them so special?
MSCs are like the multi-talented members of the cellular world.
Okay.
They can differentiate, meaning they can transform
Okay.
into all kinds of other cell types, like bone, cartilage, muscle cells.
Wow.
This makes them really useful for things like tissue repair.
So they're like the body's own repair crew.
Exactly. But that's not all.
Okay.
They can also modulate the immune system,
Okay.
fine-tune it almost.
Wow.
And what's even more fascinating,
Yeah.
we're constantly finding new sources of these cells.
Oh, really?
For example, parasites,
Parasites.
the cells that surround blood vessels.
Okay.
They might actually be a source of MSCs.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It seems like we still have a lot to learn about these cells.
we do.
So how do they fit into the bigger picture of immunotherapy?
That's where NK cells come in.
Okay.
You'll definitely want to understand this relationship for your presentation.
Okay.
It's a big deal for developing new immunotherapies.
Okay.
NK cells are part of the innate immune system,
Okay.
which means they're the body's first line of defense.
Gotcha.
Like security guards always patrolling, getting rid of threats like tumor cells and virus-infected cells.
So they're like the body's own personal army.
Exactly. And they're very good at their job.
Okay.
NK cells can tell the difference between healthy cells and harmful ones
Oh, wow. How do they do that?
by recognizing something called MHC class molecules
MAC class.
on the surface of cells.
Okay.
If a cell doesn't have those molecules or they look different, the NK cell knows something's up
Oh,
and eliminates the threat.
wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But how do MSCs fit into all of this?
The interaction between MSCs and NK cells is tricky.
Okay.
It depends on a lot of factors,
Uh-huh.
but in many studies, MSCs actually inhibit NK cell activity.
Really?
Yeah, it might sound counterintuitive,
Okay.
but sometimes you need to dampen the immune response.
Yeah.
You don't want it overreacting,
Right.
causing damage to healthy tissues.
So it's like MSCs are telling the NK cells to stand down.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And this ability to suppress NK cells,
Yeah.
that's what makes MSCs so interesting for immunotherapy. Imagine using MSCs to control the immune response
Yeah.
in organ transplantation or autoimmune diseases,
Oh, wow. So you can...
where the immune system is attacking the body.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But how exactly do MSCs inhibit NK cells?
Right.
What's going on there?
MSCs have a few ways of influencing NK cells.
Okay.
For example, they can suppress NK cell proliferation,
Meaning?
meaning they slow down the reproduction.
Okay.
They can also induce apoptosis in NK cells,
Which is...
programmed cell death.
Wow, so they have a lot of control
They do.
over NK cell fate.
Yes, they do. And it gets even more complex.
Okay.
MSCs can affect the production of cytokines by NK cells.
Cytokines.
You got it.
Those are like the chemical messengers of the immune system, right?
Exactly. They allow cells to communicate.
Right.
And the research on MSCs and cytokine production
Yeah.
is really fascinating
Okay.
because it shows how complex this interaction is.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes MSCs increase cytokine production, and sometimes they decrease it.
So it's not always the same.
It depends on the context,
Okay.
the types of MSCs involved.
So the effect of MSCs on NK cells isn't always the same.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting and challenging.
Wow.
It also highlights the need to really think about the context
Yeah.
when developing MSC-based therapies.
Okay, so we've got MSCs inhibiting NK cell proliferation,
Right.
inducing apoptosis,
Yeah.
and modulating cytokine production.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other ways they influence NK cells?
Absolutely. They can also impact degranulation
Okay.
and cytotoxicity.
So like how effective NK cells are at killing.
Precisely. What's interesting is that MSCs might increase the production of some of the killing molecules,
Okay.
like perforin and granzyme,
Uh-huh.
but they still hinder the NK cell's ability to actually use them.
It's like they're being disarmed.
Yeah, in a subtle way.
That's a pretty clever strategy.
It is.
So MSCs can control NK cell numbers,
Right.
their lifespan, their
Yes.
communication, and even their killing ability.
Pretty much.
Anything else?
They can change the expression of receptors
You're a sucker.
on the surface of NK cells.
Okay.
These receptors are like sensors
Okay.
that allow NK cells to recognize and respond to signals.
Uh-huh.
Some of them activate the NK cells.
Okay.
Others inhibit them.
Gotcha.
By changing the balance of those receptors,
Uh-huh.
MSCs can really fine-tune NK cell activity.
It sounds like they have a whole toolkit
They do.
for manipulating NK cells. And they can even influence the different subtypes of NK cells too, right?
You're exactly right. There are two main subsets
Okay.
called CD56 bright and CD56 dim.
Okay.
They have slightly different roles,
Okay.
with CD56 bright focusing on cytokine production
Uh-huh.
and CD56 dim being more cytotoxic, better at killing.
Okay.
MSCs can shift the balance between these two.
Wow, this is getting really complex.
It is.
It seems like MSCs have a huge impact on NK cells.
They do.
But is it a one-way street? Can NK cells influence MSCs too?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
It turns out this relationship goes both ways.
Really?
And NK cells can indeed affect MSCs.
Oh, wow.
Want to hear more?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it definitely goes both ways.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about NK cells always being on the lookout?
Yeah, they're like the security guards.
Right. Well, turns out that MSCs can actually express certain molecules
Okay.
called ligands that NK cell receptors can recognize.
So MSCs have these like markers that make them potential targets.
Yeah, you could say that.
It seems like that would put them at a disadvantage.
You'd think so. But MSCs are pretty clever.
Okay.
They've got a bunch of ways to protect themselves from NK cells.
Okay.
And the expression of these ligands can actually be influenced by NK cell activity.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
it's like a back and forth.
Yeah, like a constant balance between attack and defense.
That makes sense. It can't be all one-sided if they're working together in the body.
Right.
So when would NK cells actually attack MSCs?
Well, some studies have shown that activated NK cells can kill MSCs.
Okay.
It really comes down to the balance of signals that the NK cells are getting.
Okay.
Think of it like a scale.
Okay.
If the activating signals outweigh the inhibitory signals, the NK cell will attack.
Okay.
But if the inhibitory signals are stronger,
Yeah.
it'll hold back.
So it's like a decision-making process for the NK cells.
Exactly. And MSCs can actually influence that process.
Wow. By tweaking the signals.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this tug of war going on.
Right.
But how does it actually work at the molecular level?
How do MSCs exert their influence?
Yeah, like what are the mechanisms?
There are a few key mechanisms at play.
Okay.
One is the production of soluble factors by MSCs.
Soluble factors.
These act like messages traveling between cells.
So like chemical messengers.
Precisely.
Hmm.
Some of these factors, like PGE2-IDO and TGF-beta,
Okay.
have shown to directly suppress NK cell activity.
So they're like telling the NK cells to calm down.
That's a good way to put it.
That's fascinating how they use these chemical signals
It is.
to control the immune response. Are there other mechanisms involved too?
Yes, there are. MSCs can also influence NK cells through direct contact.
Oh, so they don't always need those chemical messengers.
Not always.
Okay.
This is where things get a bit more complex.
Okay.
We start talking about specific signaling pathways inside the cells.
This is where I might need a little help.
Okay.
I know the basics of cell signaling,
Right.
but can you break down some of these pathways for me?
Absolutely. One pathway that's really important here is the JAK-STAT pathway.
JAK-STAT.
This pathway is essential for lots of cellular functions,
Okay.
including immune responses.
So it's like a command center for the cell.
That's a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And MSCs can actually modulate this pathway in NK cells.
Wow, so they're tweaking the settings of the command center.
That's one way to think about it.
That makes sense. So they can influence function without actually killing them?
Exactly. It's a very subtle form of control.
Okay, very cool. Are there any other pathways involved?
Yes. Another interesting mechanism involves a molecule called CD73.
CD73, that sounds familiar.
It's found on the surface of NK cells.
Is that one of those receptors we were talking about?
You got it. CD73 is an enzyme that's part of the purinergic signaling pathway.
Okay, now we're getting technical. What's the purinergic signaling pathway?
Think of it as a communication network
Okay.
within the immune system.
Okay.
It uses molecules like ATP.
ATP, that's the cell's energy, right?
Exactly.
What's it doing in the immune system?
Well, ATP and adenosine act like signaling molecules.
Yeah.
They can be like alarms alerting the immune system to danger.
So when a cell is damaged,
Right.
it releases these signaling molecules.
And that triggers an immune response.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, here's where CD73 comes in.
Okay.
CD73 breaks down AMP into adenosine.
Okay.
And adenosine, unlike ATP, has an immunosuppressive effect.
So it's like a calming signal.
Exactly. Telling the immune system to dial it back.
Okay, so by increasing CD73 expression on NK cells, MSCs could be suppressing the immune response.
You got it. It's
Yeah.
like they're using CD73 to manipulate that whole pathway.
Oh, that's amazing.
And this is just one example. Another fascinating pathway involves a receptor called LRR1.
LRR1, what does that stand for?
It stands for leukocyte-associated immunoglobulin-like receptor 1.
Okay, that's a mouthful. We'll just stick with LRR1.
Yep.
What does this receptor do?
LRR1 is an inhibitory receptor.
Okay.
It's found on a lot of immune cells, including NK cells.
Okay.
When it's activated, it suppresses the immune response.
So it's like another off switch for NK cells?
Exactly. And one of his key ligands is collagen.
Collagen. Isn't that what gives our skin its elasticity?
It is. It's actually the most abundant protein in our body.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it plays a role in a lot of things, including immune regulation.
Okay.
When LR1 on NK cells binds to collagen,
Uh-huh.
it triggers a chain of events that suppresses NK cell activity.
So MSCs could be indirectly influencing NK cells through this pathway.
You're catching on.
Yeah.
And to make things even more interesting,
Okay.
there's another molecule called LI2,
LIR2.
which acts as a decoy receptor.
A decoy receptor.
It can bind to collagen,
Okay.
preventing it from interacting with LRR1.
So it's like a collagen sponge,
That's a great analogy.
preventing it from activating that off switch.
Exactly.
Wow, this is so complex.
It's a very intricate system.
It's amazing how MSCs can manipulate all these pathways to
Right.
control the immune response. But we've been talking a lot about suppression.
Yeah.
Are there any situations where MSCs might actually enhance NK cell activity?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because that seems like it would be important for immunotherapy,
It would.
especially for fighting things like cancer.
That's a great point. And it leads us to the most exciting part of this.
Okay.
The clinical potential of all of this.
Okay.
Are you ready to explore the possibilities?
Yes, definitely. Let's dive in.
Yeah, definitely. Let's dive in.
So we've talked a lot about how MSCs suppress NK cells. Right. It seems like they're really good at that.
They are. But what if we could engineer them?
Engineer them.
Yeah, to actually enhance NK cell activity.
Wow. That would be incredible.
It would be a game changer for things like cancer.
Yeah, like turning those peacekeepers into trainers for the NK cells.
Exactly. Making them better at eliminating threats.
But how could we do that?
That's the cutting edge of research.
Okay.
Scientists are looking at ways to genetically modify MSCs
Genetically modify them.
to boost their ability to stimulate NK cells.
Okay.
Imagine engineering them to produce more cytokines.
The ones that activate NK cells.
Exactly, or to express ligands that bind to those activating receptors.
So instead of calm down signals, they're sending attack signals.
Precisely. We could supercharge the NK cells,
Wow.
make them much more potent,
That would be amazing, especially for solid tumors.
right? Because those can be really hard to target.
Yeah. Are there other potential applications for this?
Definitely. Remember serpins.
The molecules that shield MSCs from attack.
Yeah, what if we engineered MSCs to produce fewer serpins?
Wait, so make them more vulnerable?
It sounds counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but there are times when boosting NK cells, even if it means losing some MSCs,
Okay.
could be beneficial
Like,
in some autoimmune diseases
okay.
where the immune system attacks healthy cells.
Right.
Making MSCs more susceptible to NK cells
Uh-huh.
could actually help control that.
So it's like a strategic sacrifice
You could say that.
to get a stronger immune response overall.
Exactly. It's a way to indirectly manipulate the immune system.
That's really clever.
So we've gone from MSCs as suppressors to potentially using them as enhancers.
That's a pretty big shift.
It is, and it all comes from understanding that complex interaction.
This has been a fascinating deep dive.
I agree.
We've learned so much
Yeah.
about how these cells work together.
We've only scratched the surface.
And the potential for new therapies is incredible.
Absolutely limitless.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It is. There's so much more to learn.
I feel much more prepared for my presentation now.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into MSCs and NK cells.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring the frontiers of science.